Hi there, I'm Robert Ingham and I'm the Project Lead for Management Quality at the Transition Pathway Initiative Centre at LSE. I'm going to give a short presentation of the company expansion in terms of the number of companies we're assessing for management quality in this last year, and also have a quick look at the results in terms of how companies are doing against the framework. So for those of you that are not familiar with the management quality framework, it's a stepwise framework that's got 6 levels, and it's got 23 indicators across those 6 levels. They get progressively more difficult, and a company must meet all indicators on a particular level to move on to the next level. So for example, if a company sits on level 2, that signifies that it's met all of the indicators on level 0 and level 1. The V5.0 framework was released in October 2023. It's the newest framework, but you can also find results for all companies against the older V4.0 framework at the Transition Pathway Initiative website. The data that underlies these assessments are all provided by our data partner, FTSE Russell and LSEG Business. In terms of the increase in company coverage in this last year, we've increased the number of companies covered from 1,000 to 2,000 roughly. You can see here that previously we'd looked to increase coverage by adding to high emitting or core sectors for TPI. Those are things such as electricity utilities, oil and gas and coal mining. As we've reached relative saturation of those core sectors, this year we've taken a more sector agnostic approach to increasing coverage, and we're adding companies to sectors such as consumer goods, consumer services and financials. Now, to take account for the fact that there are more and more companies from those non-core sectors that are now being assessed, we've slightly changed our sectoral alignment, and it now aligns with FTSE's industry classification benchmark. What that means in practice is that companies that previously would have gone into the consumer goods, of industrials or services sectors are now split into 10 more granular sectors that give you more detail as to the business operations of the different companies. So a large majority of the new companies sit within those new sectors, and we've also resectorized roughly 200 or 250 previously assessed companies as well. In terms of the results, in terms of how companies are doing when assessed against this framework, you can see that the absolute majority, or 55%, now sit on level 3. And in fact, if you take level 0 to 5 and treat it as continuous variable, then the mean or average score is 3.0. So what that means is whichever way you cut it, level 3 is the average score, which means companies are beginning to integrate climate change and energy transition considerations into their operational decision making. We still see roughly 22% of companies sitting on level 0 to 2, which means they've failed to meet a fairly basic indicator, such as having a policy statement on climate change, reporting their scope 1 and 2 emissions, or setting an emissions reduction target. Conversely, we see 24 companies sitting on level 4 to 5, and those companies that we generally consider to be high performing. We have seen quite a sharp differentiation in the performance of companies that are newly added as compared to those that have previously been assessed by the TPI Centre and displayed by the TPI Centre. You can see here that of the newly assessed companies, 31% sit on level 0 to 2, and only 16% sit on levels 4 to 5, and it's roughly converse to that for the previously assessed companies. Now, that's consistent with the findings of a regression analysis that we undertook for the recently published State of the Transition report, which found that sector, company size and region were all important variables for explaining a company's MQ score. So when it comes to sector, when we find that the newly added companies, fewer of them come from the high performing sectors such as airlines and electricity utilities. When it comes to region, more companies of the newly added companies come from China and other Asia, and fewer from Europe and Australasia, which are the high performing regions. And when it comes to size, we've got fewer large cap companies being added and more medium and smaller cap companies being added, and they tend to perform more poorly against the management quality framework than the large cap. So the findings of this are consistent with the previous regression analysis that we've undertaken. When it comes to the indicator by indicator scores, this is more or less as you'd expect to find it, with companies scoring well against the easier early indicators within the framework and scoring relatively poorly against the more testing later indicators. So when it comes to indicators 1 to 3, for example, you can see that about 90% of companies will meet all of those indicators. When it comes to indicators 19 to 23, so those that sit within level 5 of the framework, relatively few companies are meeting any of those individual indicators. Only 2% made a commitment to phase out capex in carbon-intensive assets. Only 1% have disclosed how they're aligning their capex and their decarbonisation goals, for example. And in fact, we've got no company that meets all of the indicators within level 5. So just a quick update and overview of the key findings. We've doubled the number of companies that are assessed this year from 1,000 to about 2,000. There's data for both the previous framework and the current V5.0 framework available on the TPI website now. For the second consecutive year, the majority of companies sit on level 3, so level 3 is now what we'd consider a par score, absolutely, in terms of what companies achieve, and no more than 10% of companies score on any level 5 indicator. Now, all the information that's just been presented can be found at the Transition Pathway Initiative website. That's www.transitionpathwayinitiative.org. And if you have any further questions about the management quality process or the results, you can reach out to us at tpi@lse.ac.uk.